Thank you very much. I'm worried now I might have to change my behavior and act professional. But I am Seth Miller. I am the editor of PaxX.Aero. I am obsessed with airplanes and have been for far too long. And as part of that, like to get people on stage like this and ask them questions about how we're going to make the travel experience better. And we do that around many different topics. Today's happens to be accessibility related, and specifically around the in-flight entertainment experience. So I do want to get into questions, but real quick, just so everybody knows who's who, can we talk just real quick, name where you're from and like one interesting thing about you, but no more than 30 seconds? Axel?
Yeah. Thanks, Ed, for having me here. My name is Axel Becker. I'm working for Airbus in cabin marketing, being responsible for trend research and market intelligence, and I'm the focal point for accessibility topics in cabin marketing.
My name is Louis Papard. I'm a software product manager at SPI, and Rave Accessible IFE is one of the products that we've been working on for a couple years now, and we're super proud of it and happy to be here spreading that enablement message.
Duncan Jackson. I'm the president of FlightPath 3D. We're the moving map company that you guys like to sit and stare at, so thank you for your attention and eyeballs. And I am addicted to playing football and soccer, so that's, if I can get out on the field, that's my jams.
I'm Daniel Jacobs, but everybody calls me DJ. I'm the CEO at Stellar Entertainment. Stellar is the longest established in-flight entertainment content service provider in the world. We've been around for over 50 years. And I'm German originally, so AIX always gets me back to my home country, which is exciting, but I'm based in Australia.
Good. So I'm Antonio Pni, I'm from Apex, and basically we are the association of the airline passenger experience, and I'm so happy to be here to talk in amazing topics that we will speak today. So great. Thank you.
Thank you all for that. Axel, how big a problem is this? How much do we actually need to be focused on accessibility? I know you've got some numbers that you're excited about on this, so what are we looking at here?
Yeah, thank you for this question. So actually, this is very close to my, let's say, core job being a trend researcher. So according to the World Health Organization, we have 1.3 billion people with severe disabilities worldwide. So this is around 16% of the world population. We have around 18 million permanent wheelchair users. We have close to 300 million blind and low vision people. 430 million people facing deaf and hard of hearing, and close to 1 billion people with cognitive disabilities, which is really, let's say, not a single disability, so it's a kind of whole bunch of different topics you have to consider. And this problem is getting bigger, only for demographics in developed countries. Yeah, I would say that's clear figures for saying how big the topic is.
Okay, so I guess we better solve it. We got 41 minutes left. Can we get there?
We got this.
Go team. There's obviously, so this obviously then is a significant issue. In the IFE world in particular, right, we talk a lot historically about can we get these people on board? We had a whole section yesterday about getting wheelchair space on board and things like that. But once they get on board, being on board, being safe is one thing, but you sort of look at the hierarchy of what's useful as an experience. Getting closer to having the full travel experience that everybody else has, or making it consistent for everybody. In the IFE world, what are some of the none of it's easy, but what are some of the easy wins we can get to start and then build from to try to make this happen?
Yeah, I mean, in-flight entertainment, right? It's a lot of hardware that's installed on airplanes, but it also runs on software, right? Just like your phones do, and you take software updates on your phone all the time, your in-flight entertainment systems can be updated with software as well, right? Mm-hmm. Which means you have this amazingly iterative, expandable space that you can continue to enable people as new and more exciting features come along in the future. Mm-hmm. So as long as you have a way to do that, and you admit that, hey, this is something that we need to do, the first step is admitting, right? Then you can go on to enabling, right? We've gotten ourselves in a position where we've created a really great space. We're starting the conversations, and there's a lot of technology right now. We're at the most exciting time, like, since ever when it comes to technology with AI and everything else, that we can start creating tons of these features and adding them onto these platforms in an easier way than ever, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I think I heard that like good design is inclusive by default.
Yeah.
If it works for some, it doesn't work,
Yeah.
right? We provide the journey information. Before there was a map, it was ask the flight attendant, are we there yet? We have a lot of passengers that don't know, are we there yet? And if you think about, you did a great job framing it, Axel, the billion passengers or the billion, the world's population that translates to cognitive challenges ranging from amnesia on one end, right, all the way to ADHD on the other side. You look at what the map represents today, that's about as busy as it gets, right? There's place names jumping out at you, there's buttons everywhere, the plane's physically moving, it's just information overload. When you look at the visual stimulants that there, if you're like partially blind or blind, super hard to look at all those colors. You guys love seeing that satellite imagery. It's great, you really get that rich experience. Well, that contrast is unable to be seen by some. So are we there yet? Where are we? What time do we land? That information is not in the hands of somebody that sat in this tin can in the sky for a very long period of time for a lot of passengers. So how important is it? It's really important to get that stuff out there. And it is an easier lift. It's an easier lift to do some of these digital upgrades that you're talking about. The infrastructure can get put in place. It's a quick win compared to, widening aisles or creating space and moving seats around for wheelchairs and stuff. So I think the digital is something that people need to push on very aggressively.
Well, and in-flight entertainment systems are becoming more and more powerful, and they're also becoming more and more expansive in terms of the things that airlines are expecting their passengers to be able to utilize them for. I mean, I think we're moving past the days of just being able to experience media, but this is the place where passengers are going to start ordering their food. It's going to be, of course, a marketplace for duty-free and things like that, but you're going to have more and more applications that airlines are going to be expecting passengers to be able to utilize, and these need to be inclusive features.
Right. And just so you know, our mission 10 years ago is inclusive by design. So we're not hitting the sweet spot now because it's cool or there's a set of legal boundaries. Our mission is to guide every flying passenger, and we set that goal regardless of device, age, or ability. So this isn't checking the box stuff. You're inclusive by a culture and a set of behaviors, or you're following legal frameworks or just trying to check the box. And I think there's a very different mindset around that. So.
And talking about easy wins from a content perspective, it's obviously what we've seen in recent years that there's a lot more demand for closed captions on all content elements on board, and also audio descriptive to create more accessibility for people with vision and hearing impairment. And while the US carriers have sort of a legal requirement to add closed captions on all of their content, we see this expanding globally on all other airlines as well. And the studios as well, the Hollywood studios, are responding to that by making audio descriptive, like closed captions has been pretty standard for a while, but even audio descriptive is becoming more and more available with their new content.
Antonio, I want to extend that to you a little bit. I know Apex works a lot with the studios on some of the content and standards and things like that. I have to admit, one of my first conferences I attended was Apex Tech in the prior decade, and it was literally one of my first conferences in the industry, and I was like, yeah, and we're going to get closed captioning on all these movies, and it was while Apex was working on that closed captioning standard, and I came away from like, wow, this industry really gets it. And someone had to explain to me that we've had that exact same meeting for more than a decade and we hadn't actually gotten anywhere. And so now we sort of have, which is great, but the industry has not always been quick to get there, and it's sometimes been the studios sort of holding back. So from Apex's perspective, and because you work so closely with the studios, have you seen a switch there? Are the studios finally getting it?
Yes, so basically we are seeing right now a lot of airlines that are implementing a lot of new technology on the cabin. So in Apex, we are so proud that we we are close with the studios, but also with the content providers, with everyone, just to engage more and more the passenger. Because for some families, it's the journey is important when they go on board with the accessibility person. It's to give him like the best experience on board. So some airlines are implementing some new features. It is so good to see that with the new technology that we are seeing on the new EFE systems, basically this is what is happening more and more. So we have the sign language, for example, in the welcome screens for the passengers. We have now, like for the hearing, some tests with the vibration for the turbulence. So there is a lot with some suppliers are doing, and principle for the content, there is more and more solutions.
Great. Louis, you mentioned it's easy. It's just software. We just iterate through it and make it happen. I don't think you said easy, but that was implied. I'll put that word in your mouth. But it's not easy.
It's not.
These are airplanes, and we have regulators, and we have rules, and we have many other things that are pain in the ass. So how do you approach that sort of iterative design challenge when you can't do it as quickly as you can in the air, on the ground, or can you sort of?
Well, I think as everything evolves, we're getting to a place where it is easier to update that software. Like on our systems, we have a concept of modes, so it's really easy for us to create additional modes and then add those to our systems. But like you mentioned earlier about like ticking a box, right? And it's really difficult trying to transition the industry away from ticking a box, right? Because when you think about a lot of how aviation works, you have this immense set of requirements. You meet all the requirements, and then it's done. You deliver it. And the thing about designing for accessibility is that box can inherently never ever be ticked. You have to become comfortable with saying there is a box. You can start to shade it in, but the box will get bigger as new technologies get developed. I'm sure a year from now, we'll sit here saying, oh, can you believe we weren't talking about this brand new feature that doesn't exist yet and how we were living without it, right? You have to become very, very comfortable with this box will never fully be ticked, but you need to be able to iteratively shade in pieces of it as new features become available, as new technologies develop, and then having a great way to build those in, like your accessible map or our mode, that you can then go and add those features and capabilities into as they develop, right? And then rolling them out with your software updates is just like every other software update that comes out. But like you mentioned, it is quite difficult. And so there's a lot of things.
But relative to like widening aisles and physical hardware in the cabin,
Oh, of
I mean,
course.
this is the sweet spot right now for getting some lift. It might not be the best from a value perspective, but I honestly, and I believe so because I'm in the digital space, but I think where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah.
From the content side of things, are you guys seeing sort of it's not particularly iterative, but are you seeing an incremental approach? Is it a trickle? Is it a flood? How are you seeing those changes coming along?
It depends kind of who you're talking to. I think with some airlines it would be
you.
a flood. With others, it's more trickling. So I think, but it's in general the sort of like, you know, the rising tide lifts all the boats. So I think we're going to see this expand across all airlines more and more.
Yeah, we talk a lot of times that the rising tide lifts all boats, that concept. We talk a little bit about airlines talk a lot, they don't compete on safety, right? Anything that makes the aviation industry safer, everybody cooperates on, sort of. And so when we're talking about accessibility and that side of things, I know, Duncan, you did an interview with Ekram last October where you talked about that with the accessibility map of we shouldn't be competing on accessibility things, and yet sometimes you have to, and it's because it still costs money to do some of this stuff. How do you guys see that sort of relationship evolving, and are there things that can be done to sort of smooth those lumps and the differences between the different airlines?
Actually, so we are not an IFE provider, so I'm talking about things I have no clue about. However, it starts with the passenger needs. And we need to collaborate on the needs. We need to know what are the insights. So we are doing a lot of work on passenger journeys for different types of disabilities, and I think everybody's doing that. And it's not only regulation, it's about finding the right standards. So because standards for contrast or standards for colors should be in IFE the same for placards, for example.
Exactly.
So the baseline could be the same, the application and the systems is then different.
I mean, there's a lot of standards that exist for web design, right? This isn't the first time that anyone has tried and make software or technology more accessible. So the most important thing that we found is that by talking with and working with all of these communities, you become very quickly knowledgeable on a lot of the standards that they reference and utilize, especially like web design, WCAG, things like that. And you're able to then go and say, well, these standards exist. Let's try and get our system up to those standards. And then as soon as you get there, you discover more that you didn't know about. And by iterating through, you can improve and improve and improve on those designs.
Yeah, and I'll say that so we're in a fortunate position of having 90 airline clients. So I think we've got 58 meetings at the show because we've got this little niche map thing that people love. And airlines are ferociously competitive, right? They have to be. It's their nature in their business. And I constantly get asked, what can we have that's different? How do we differentiate ourselves? Enter the world of accessibility, and it's like a door opened. So the point with Delta was we sat down with them last year and said, let's launch this accessibility map. I asked a handful of airlines if they're interested in collaborating. We had like 10 at the table within days saying, let's do it. And I was like, whoa, back off, guys. So Delta were like, get it loaded in our labs within 6 weeks. I'll bring the disability board in, so let's get going. And this is an airline that's got like 20 different IFE configurations and systems and monitor versions and resolutions and so on. So we put it in the labs, this huge like bank of monitors down in Atlanta. They brought in the accessibility, the disability board. I was sat there and this one lady was partially sighted and hugging me. We had to turn the lights off because of the glare and we started playing with the product. I nearly stood on a guide dog at one point because it was a crazy environment. But the conversations we were having was, we want this on our plane as fast as possible. It's a moral imperative. And we're okay with this going everywhere as fast as possible. And to hear an airline say, I want this on United, I want this on American, I want this on Virgin, Air France. So they just had a perspective that this is good for the industry. Very rare for someone to be that passionate about getting a version of something everywhere, but that's a different mindset. And so, a different features, very more closed, and let's build something that's special for them. But that was absolutely night and day from an accessibility standard. So.
Yeah, and having that consistency is really, really key. Passengers with disabilities prepare more for their travel journey than any other passenger, right? Because you have to work at overcoming your disability. And when you can have a consistent experience from one plane to another, which is remarkably difficult even in this day and age on the same operator, imagine going from one operator to the next. Having a good, consistent experience that's familiar goes a long way.
Yeah, the cognitive overload to try and figure stuff out for a billion people out there is really challenging. So, and when you reduce that environment, you have to strip back buttons, high hit targets, space them out appropriately. People learn a certain experience as to how to navigate in and out of things. Well, the next flight's completely different. It's cognitive overload.
It's like when you have a software update on your phone and they move one of the icons around and then you're like, why would they do that? And then imagine a completely new and unfamiliar experience that you can make familiar.
Yeah, my mum has a motor skills issue, so she's got the shaky hands and stuff. She couldn't hardly control an IFE. So, it's impossible for her to get the experience anyway. So that needs more of an automated process where you're fed the information, more like spoon-fed, which technology absolutely allows. So.
And while traditionally software and hardware implementations take a bit longer, I'd love to see accessibility in content become more of a differentiator for airlines. We've done a lot of work there with American Airlines over the last 2 years, really increasing their accessibility options for audio descriptive, but we're also working a lot with their community teams on inclusive content lineups for channels for Disability Awareness Month and Black History Month, Hispanic Heritage Month. So a lot of even across like people with disability, also creating a holistic, accessible content experience for everyone on board. And we've seen that recognized with Apex last year because American Airlines got nominated for the Entertainment Innovation Award, which was really good to see. So if we have more spotlight on that, then maybe airlines can also, on the content side, increase their accessibility.
Louis, you get a demerit point, but I'm going to ask you a question so you can try to earn your way out of it. Hypothetically speaking, one of the things you focused on is trying to have this consistent experience in that for these passengers. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that Saffron may have announced an hour ago that you're doing that makes that easier?
Come on. There does happen to be one. So we've been working for a couple years now on designing an entire in-flight entertainment system that could be accessible, right? And because you need to help create that consistency from whether it is one airline from one fleet that's on our system and another fleet that they may have that's on a competing system, we really need to try and get that consistency. And the only way to do that is to have the same software, the same experience, the same user interface on all of these systems. The way that we know to do that is to design a really great one, and then if we can give it away for free, we can really remarkably lower that barrier of entry for an airline that would want to say, hey, can I put your designs on our other aircraft? And that's not something that anybody normally does. And we said, yeah, sure, we're cool with that. That allows the airline to then go and put the exact same looking experience on our system and on their other fleet that has a competitor, so that a passenger can get on board, and when they change their connection onto another aircraft, they can get that exact same experience regardless of who makes the box. And that's something that we're pretty proud of. So.
Thank you. DJ, going back over to you for a second, you mentioned the expanded content that you're doing with American Airlines and obviously, hopefully with others as well. How much of making the experience more accessible is just a function of more, right? More content with the audio descriptors, with the closed captionings, with all of those things versus what we're talking about of more, and we can say just more consistency, but sort of dialing it back, but making sure it's easy, that it's accessible.
Yeah, so I think for us, what we can control, obviously, as a CSP is the content side of things. So I'd love to see sort of collaboration, obviously, with the OEM side of things, as to how can we bridge the gap from a metadata point of view for supporting media, maybe advocating with content owners on creating supporting materials to expand on accessibility. But currently, it's more about what is available right now for us to do, and also even from a creation point of view, because we're creating a lot of closed captions for airlines. We're creating custom language dubs for certain airlines like Air Astana. So we're trying to sort of expand as much as possible in the area that we can control from the licensing and content delivery side.
Do the studios get mad at you when you make new copies of languages and things like that?
Well, as long as we're giving it to them, for them to then, distribute to others, then it's usually okay.
How generous of them. One of the challenges, we talked about iterating and, getting this to a functional thing that really works, but it doesn't always work the first time, but you have to iterate through this. But have you had experiences where it's gone, I don't want to say really wrong, but wrong enough that you've had to sort of pull back, rethink, revisit things? What are some of the sort of the lessons learned there, and how you iterate them? How do you discover those, and how do you work through it?
The easiest way is by working together and communicating. So, as you're going and developing, it's really, really great to do some designs, do some mock-ups, put them together, And then we found that working with airlines has been fantastic. A lot of airlines have, whether it's an accessible board or local communities that they're already in touch with, to bring in and get hands-on testing. And occasionally you do find that some of your ideas from looking at exactly what a person says that they need and actually going and developing and putting it on the system and putting it in front of them and finding that it does not work whatsoever is heartbreaking from a design perspective, but you have to get very comfortable with being wrong, and then how you approach and move forward from after you've made your mistake to figuring out exactly what you need to do to make the experience better.
Yeah,
right? I mean, I've sat in front of a person who I've seen break down in tears from how difficult one of our systems was. And we said, this is so easy to change. Like, this is the changing of a timer value. It's something so simple that you can realize makes such a dramatic impact on someone. You just have to be open and communicate.
Yeah, and you think in the software world, it's awesome because we have a hack, which is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And these describe how you can apply digital applications and web to make them more accessible. And it sits it into different categories of this is for the neurologically challenged, the visual challenged, font sizes, contrast colors, ratios. There are actual applications you can load. So you can put a plugin in your browser, download it, hit it, and it will tell you, is this page accessible or not? And it will highlight all the little boxes that are wrong size and fonts and contrast. So we took the map, we worked through the accessibility guidelines, we checked all the boxes to make sure that this thing was rocking, and we knew that it would pass all these guidelines, which is great. Now we are approved for the American Disability Act, the European Accessibility Act, the American Access Act. So we take it out to the labs, and the Delta example is great. We put this in front of 15 users, and even though the contrast was perfectly tuned to what it should be based on these web guidelines, they're screaming at us saying the landmass is too bright. It's just got too much glare. You've got people trying to read the fonts, and they're literally leading in, and they're like 4 inches from the screen, trying to give you descriptions as to how this should happen. The neurologically challenged are sitting there, and there's a big button said "Find Plane." Can't find it. So we took a ton of feedback where we had large fonts. We removed all the place names. You guys do not know when you look at a map that there's like 1 million cities because you just see through it. So we ripped them down to the main ones in like different geographic regions. And even then they couldn't orient themselves to it. So we had to make the fonts just giant, which were twice the accessibility guidelines. So all I'm saying is that to Louis' comment, until you put it in the hands of users and actually get them, interacting and touching this stuff, it pales in significance to checking the box for these kind of guidelines and stuff. And yeah, you learn a lot. You rip it all up and then you just, keep going.
Anyone out there have questions? I got lots of things I can talk to these guys about, but anyone else have something you're particularly keen on? Wave at me if you come up with something. I will come out and bring a mic to you. One of the things, Duncan, I think you mentioned earlier was the legal obligations, or DJ, one of you mentioned that with the closed captioning and whatnot, and there are some legal obligations in the United States, but how much are you seeing with your airline customers an effort to sort of go beyond the legal obligation and do this anyways, even when it's not mandated by a government?
Well, I think one thing to be clear is the European Accessibility Act has a timeline that's coming up like in June, July this year, so there's an actual deadline that we're hitting right now. It's airline specific. I'm sure you guys see that some are leaning in really aggressively. So when we paneled the airlines, the Deltas, Uniteds, Air New Zealand's, Virgin Atlantic's chomping at the bit to get this stuff out there. So I think it's less regulatory with the Inflight folks than it is legal from what we're seeing. And we significantly underestimated the desire to do something in this space, like significantly. Greater than some of the revenue-making things, which was quite surprising, so yeah.
From a closed captions point of view, I see this as well because passenger habits and audience habits have changed. So even if you watch at home, Netflix, Hulu, like I have a lot of people, even native English speakers, who still switch on closed captions, and that becomes the benchmark and the expectation as well. So I think what we have with airlines that might not have a legal requirement, they still get that passenger feedback and asking for it more and more.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a really important point. I think in our days, like some airlines are checking what they could do to offer more and more for all type of passengers. So like we have the Innovation Awards, Apex, that we have seen like a lot of new, like let's call it, for example, they see like all the journey, all the feedback that they have, and then they try to put that in the cabins. So for example, we have United that you mentioned, Duncan, that's for the blind passengers, like a really good system. We are checking like more and more airlines are offering, for example, the Bluetooth pairing for the adaptive like headphones or for some people. So that's it. I think that's the future to, again, to increase more and more the journey of that people that go on board. So yeah, some Apex airlines are doing that. We are happy, and we continue this progress because it's really important for some people when they travel.
Yeah, and we've actually found that a lot of airlines, once they've started having these accessible conversations with whether it's their internal orgs or even with just different enablement organizations, as you start actually talking to these passengers, you'll find that there's a lot of different needs that exist that end up going beyond just being more accessible. You end up realizing that some of the current and existing designs aren't actually that easy to use either.
You build stuff that like passengers are like, I want that version because this is too much info.
Exactly. And you end up finding out really great ways to even improve on your existing offering.
Totally.
I mean, especially like, what is it? The under 30 crowd has a 70+% usage rate of
Closed captions.
subtitles. And it's like, well, I mean, if the uptick rate is that high from everybody, probably it's a good idea to do for everybody,
right?
Not just for special accessibility regions.
Those youngsters.
Hi, Corinne Strikert. So question for Antonio, but I'll take a step back. So Lewis, I think it's great the work Safran's doing. I'm a huge fan of any supplier that's doing accessibility work, and Duncan, you guys are killing it too with the map, and I think that's really great work. My question to Antonio, from an Apex perspective, so obviously we don't have full representation of all the hardware suppliers up on stage, and we know standards is really the way forward. So what is Apex doing beyond the working group that they've been trying to establish for the last 12 months to drive standards when it comes to digital accessibility for in-flight entertainment?
So, yes, we are doing some progress, of course, but yeah, that's a really important point that we are now close with some hardware suppliers more and more. Principle, we will have our Apex Tech when we will speak deeply about a lot of subjects related with that. And in our Global Expo, we want that the airlines show more and more what they want to improve, and Apex are doing that. So we are, first of all, my job role, that is airline engagement. Basically, I'm close of each airline to try to understand what they are facing. And with hardware suppliers, with everyone, with the content suppliers, we try always to help everyone on that subject. So yeah, basically we are doing that. We are more and more close with some persons that are key persons to manage that subject, and yeah, basically it's that. So we were trying in Apex Tech and in Global Expo to explore more and more that subject.
I want to actually dig a little more on the closed captioning bit and the take rate sort of there. I am also someone who has started using them at home. I think it's because audio mix on movies late and content these days is just terrible. That's that, not that I'm going deaf. I'll stand by that. But are there other things that you're seeing overall sort of across the entertainment world that are used to be accessibility only that are now wins for the broader population? Are there other things that we're seeing that are going to sort of leak back into the sort of mainline systems? Yeah, for all of you, obviously, don't just look at DJ like that. And we didn't rehearse this question; it just came up.
Yeah.
But I'm curious. Are there other
I
things?
mean, I think that like closed captioning is really sort of another way of narrating what's going on, and so it's a different stimuli, right? Your audio and your visual at the same time. I actually believe artificial intelligence is going to make a huge difference in this journey. An example being, because it drives me nuts, people just plug in a chatbot and let it go, and it's like, that's not AI, it's just plugging in some open source widget. We sat down and have defined a bunch of paths as to how AI can actually be helpful, because every single one of you in the room today, you want a flight assistant, you want a concierge, you want the airport information guy, and then maybe you want your geography teacher that was just kind of super interesting to tell you stuff that's around you smashed together into one experience. So we built this this journey that said, and it's flying, so this isn't pie in the sky PowerPoint stuff. It's like, hey, she's called Lucy, and she says, hey, you land in 2 hours 12 minutes. Out the right-hand side of the aircraft, 45 kilometers away is the Hoover Dam. Here's some Instagrammable stuff that's happening in your destination. So it's just really valuable stuff, and it's chatting to you right in the corner of the screen, and you can get more information. We put that out in Southwest on a mobile platform and got 20 million messages in the first month. So remarkable. However, think about that from the accessibility space. We realized that there are users, we talk about the blind or partially sighted, only when I was in the labs with Delta and talking to Air New Zealand, they were like, we just want our blind passengers to know, are we there yet? How long till we land? What altitude are we at? So plugging that same feed that you sit there visually getting fed from, that's like a closed captioning, narrating your journey. And we plug in stuff like, how to find the Uber at the airport, which is insanely complex, right? You just walk through here and level 2 car park, etc. Passing that information so it can go through an audio feed so you can get a text-to-speech output. Now you've got a passenger that can sit there, just narrate the whole journey because they were not getting the where am I now and getting that journey information. So that's a kind of, in my head, a closed captioning kind of metaphor that AI can deliver, and it's delivering on that promise today. So.
Yeah, and another thing, right? I mean, we focus a lot on subtitles and closed captions, right? But the audio is really important,
Yes.
right? And as you try to be more accessible, you also start to think a lot more about inclusivity. Like, how can be more inclusive to flying base, to your passengers, right? And what we found is that while you have a lot of airlines who are just going from point A to point B, or they're hub and spoke airlines, there's a large demand, an increasing demand for having more and more languages for your content on board, right? And that can be really tricky, right? And it's difficult to have not just 3 or 4 different languages, but there are a lot of different languages that people speak that could be on board these aircraft. And things like AI can start to do, like live translations and things like that. You can really start to become not just more accessible, but just more inclusive overall,
Yes.
whether it's on an accessible version of your IFE or on the neurotypical version of your IFE.
Yeah, I think Americans got 18, 19 languages loaded.
Yeah.
We put on 19 languages, and it's that's a lot. That's a lot.
And again, it's a similar, because services like Netflix, they do a lot of localization, what studios might not do for in-flight yet, but there's increasing demand for that as well. So that's where then the custom localization comes in, where we then as the CSP or with the lab from the studio create dubs and subtitles for a wider array of languages. And I think also from the closed captions point of view, obviously the most standard one is English, but also we feel like there's, it even dips into other languages now as well, and that sort of becomes more and more available.
What about PA announcements? Hi folks, this is your captain speaking, welcome on board. We're going to be flying over to Hamburg tonight. It's 6 hours and 5 minutes en route. Should be a smooth ride. If you keep your seatbelt buckled like we do up here on the flight deck, all those little things, right? Some of that is pretty standard script, but a lot of it is not. And with some airlines have a foreign language speaking flight attendant, right? So you get someone who can do it on the PA. Some do it just if you ask. There's some options, but that is very much an accessibility thing and
Absolutely, yeah.
writ large for not just, that I don't speak the language isn't something we think of as a disability, but I travel a lot, it is.
Yeah. I think especially from like the safety video point of view as well, because some airlines do like different language versions after one another, so you can't necessarily select the language that you want to see in the subtitles. But I think there's also some efforts made to introduce sign language to future safety videos. But from a like pre-recorded announcement point of view, I think it's still very much not from an accessibility point of view, just still the standard process.
And our research shows that people need to see it visually at the same time as hearing it audio. Especially chatting to some airlines that kind of operate as kind of hubs. You get these passengers that have just spent 8 hours on a flight, they're connecting through, they've got onto the next flight. You have borderline dementia at that point because of jet lag and timing, and if it's in a foreign language and English is your second language, you need a visual treatment at the same time as audio, and you need to be able to revisit that information. So it was interesting to hear some airlines say that we recognize that different people at different phases of their journey, the eyesight gets tired, the memory and so on. I know I get tired after a long flight, so that's when you do need to have these second sort of feeds and stuff.
And this is maybe where also that personalization element can come in, when there's, a connection to the passenger manifest and you know who's sitting in that seat, which version are you being fed for the safety videos. And that could also really benefit from an accessibility point of view.
Yeah, we've been doing some exploring on that as well, about, what if we could try and take the language selected by the user, and if we were to, because we've been looking at AI capabilities and things like that, what if we could maybe try and do like live transcription of PAs, and then you've got that available not only transcribed as voice, but what about transcribed as text as well, right? And you're doing a live translation. There's a lot of different capabilities that technology is now making available, and every day you read about different ways and new features and functions that you could go and build. And as these technologies, start to mature,
They're there. Guys, I landed at Hamburg Airport, and I'm really proud of this. I could not work out how to Berlin earlier this week, and I wanted to know how to get to a certain place. I took out my phone, walking down the stairs, and I can see a sign with a lot of train stuff on it.
Yep.
I don't know where the train station is or what all this stuff is, but I want to get to a certain place in Berlin. I took a photograph. I put it into ChatGPT and I said, I'm trying to get to downtown Berlin, and it said, take the L, and it's all in German, it does it in English, it says, take the L7 at 12:32 and it should be down the stairs, right? And I get on the thing, and it's got the little panel on the wall, it's telling you the stations. I took a photograph of that and I said, how many more stops? And it's like, 6 stops, you're good, it'll be there in 15 minutes. So this stuff just rocks already. And that is multimodal, that's picture to text, you've got voice to speech that you were talking about. So this stuff's there. It's just a case of you get a pipe on a plane and a mobile device, we can start deploying this stuff super quickly.
We also work on digital solutions, so there are a couple of good apps already in the market. So where you can take a picture, the artificial intelligence is telling you, so what is in front of you exactly, describing the scene. And if you have a trained AI, for example, and you make a picture from the cabin, it can tell you the next lavatory or the next exit is behind you.
Absolutely.
exactly.
And
I mean, $20 a month, you're getting most of this right now with Claude and these models that are out there. So
we try at the moment to link these applications to the aircraft system, for example, that the passenger is getting the information whether the lavatory is occupied, or maybe you get catering information. So this is also things you could link to the in-flight entertainment.
Well,
in my view, the internet will deliver apps faster than we can get stuff onto a plane when you get a pipe on there. It's just going to go so fast because this stuff will operate.
Yeah, and you mentioned a really good thing about the catering, right? Because these in-flight entertainment systems, as they're becoming richer and richer, they're the way that passengers are not only just interacting with media and entertainment, but about how they're interacting with the entire journey. And if you can make that smarter, you can start to bridge that gap more intelligently and more accessibly, right? If you've got access to the meal menu, right, on your IFE system, and you can do it in an accessible way, you can start to provide more information that the crew don't even know about. Because, nowadays, if you're saying, oh, I have a dietary restriction and something like that, the crew aren't going to know exactly the caloric intake and the gluten-free nature of exactly each and every in-flight component.
And I just want to finish with the Be My Eyes app.
You're done.
Oh, it's just so cool. I'm going to make this, which is where a blind person is landing at airports right now, turning on the camera and being navigated through by someone else. So there's just really good stuff out there that's just very practical. Sorry.
All right, well, 41 minutes ago I said, can we solve the problem today? We did not, but we got damn close. There's a lot of interesting stuff here, a lot of opportunity. I think we did run out of time, but rolling into the end, we really are out of time. Sorry, that's why I'm cutting you off. We did at the end there sort of roll into some of the really good opportunities. There are some of the things that we're already doing and just opening up the opportunities for what's next and where we're going to go from here to make this digital experience more accessible for all, not just the people that theoretically have the special needs. So please join me thanking our panelists. And again, thank you to Safran, who is our gold sponsor, and to FlightPath 3D and Stellar Entertainment, the silver sponsor, for making this happen.